What show? I thought he was dead. Started when? Fuck! Oh well, better late than never, eh? So I'm finally over the trauma of that labyrinthine Kafkaesque nightmare otherwise known as moving to America. For the last year I've endured everyone I know asking why I would voluntarily want to move to an institutionally xenophobic theocratic dictatorship with bad tea. To which I've mostly replied, for lack of a better answer, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Which was true enough, but not quite the whole story. I'd once again come to a point in my life where I was comfortable but unhappy. At such points, you'd have a choice. You can either sit around and whine about it, or get off your ass and do something. I had always assumed that there had to be more to America than the image of gluttonous capitalist hegemony and gun-toting religious fanatics that the world at large sees, and this seemed like a perfect opportunity to actually get out there and find out for myself. Now, having gone through the process of immigration, my advice to anyone thinking about doing it is don't. It's a hellish, long, drawn-out and painful experience. Torquemada and his fellow inquisitors would have found it very educational. The Inquisition may have done far worse to people physically, but at least they had the decency not to bill them for it afterwards. If I had to sum up the process in a single phrase, it would have to be utterly arbitrary. As diabolical as it is in its own right, it is apparently not strictly necessary. Recently it has come to my attention that the US government gives away 50,000 permanent visas a year, purely at random. I can't help but feel there is something that doesn't quite tally when a country makes such a fuss over illegal immigration and makes immigrating legally more difficult than anywhere else in the Western world. And yet, every year they simply let 50,000 people in on the basis of a lottery. It rather makes you think that someone somewhere is taking the piss, doesn't it? Either way, I'm here now, and I've taken it upon myself to try and understand your strange foreign ways. And, perhaps, along the way, I may even discover why Americans can't make a decent cup of tea. Let's see how things go. Through the events of one thing and another, my recent wanderings led me back to that most interesting pit of depravity known as Detroit, and, quite appropriately, to the door of a certain Griffin. Over the hours of pleasant discourse, talk turned to the city's many ruins. Before, I knew well that Detroit had many desolate ruins, but it was only during my visit that I really discovered just what some of these buildings once were. Throughout the city there are many beautiful yet neglected crumbling edifices, relics of the dazzlingly brief yet prolific Gilded Age this nation once enjoyed. They speak of a time when even in America beauty was still prized and longevity meant centuries, not decades. But it is not just places of aesthetic beauty that have suffered. Detroit is where the grandfather of the modern car, the Model T Ford, was first built. It was there that America's tumultuous infatuation with the motor car first began, and in so doing, placed the automobile on that iconic pedestal at the center of American culture for the last 100 years. And what has become of this birthplace of cultural deity? It has been left to moulder and crumble. The American near-pathological disinterest in history, especially would seem those parts of its own history that do not pertain to open warfare, has been noted widely and frequently by many with a far greater gift of oratory than myself. Yet, when actually faced with the reality of that attitude, I find it most unfathomable. It vexes me. No civilization in history has ever done well by forgetting its origins or neglecting or obliterating the sites and symbols that constitute the roots of their very culture. Indeed, we may observe that in times past such trends often occur at the empire's twilight years. Were I so inclined, I would take this as a distinctly ill omen. In every city I have visited on this continent, I have seen hundreds of buildings abandoned and left to rot, with only a handful deemed useful only for the mountings of data broadcasting, existing to do little more than relay information to the skewed perceptions of the misanthropic masses. Perhaps it is emblematic of how our world has changed in the last century. No longer does anyone dream of empires that will endure for 1,000 years. No more do statesmen speak of peace in our time. Revolutions have become wars of attrition, and empires issue forth insincere apologies with every gunshot. Today, far too many speak of the future, whilst the wisdom of history crumbles to dust at their feet.